Hey guys, so I figured since I have already talked a ton about prototypes, and maybe some of you already know what prototypes were, but you came to the video to find out how to make them, that I would show you guys how to make a prototype real quick. Um, I'm going to make a 2D platformer prototype just because to me, that's the easiest, because I already know how to do it. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you guys how to make a prototype, and I'm going to walk you guys through my thought process. So if I want to make a 3D object first, I'm going to make a cube. I like to use cubes for a lot of my prototypes because they're just easy to work with, and I don't know, they're just super easy to work with in general, and I like working with them. It's just like um, they're fast to make. Unity has them already. You can use them in 2D or 3D, even though they're called 3D cubes. And you can name them stuff so that you kind of have an idea of like how all of the stuff is going to fit together and how it's all going to work. So I'm literally just going to make quick this camera's in the way. I'm just going to make a quick platformer. So I'm going to make this. I also like to make materials for my different objects and just to give them colors so that they can be distinguished from each other. So I'm going to give my player a color, and then I'm going to give my ground a color. And I also like to keep all of my stuff in folders because I think it's a lot easier to just keep track of it. And then the other thing that I didn't talk about in the other video that's really nice about making a prototype is that if you make like prefabs and stuff, and then you have art assets, you can just throw your art assets on top of what you already have to make your game and like make it look like it should after you have all your art and stuff. So basically all I've done is create two large boxes. This box is going to be my player, this box is going to be the ground, and now basically all I'm going to do is add, well, first thing, I'm using 2D, and you don't have to do this, but I like to. You could do it later, but I'm going to put a 2D box collider on both of these since I'm using them in 2D instead of in 3D. Regular box colliders are by default 3D, and they come on these because they are by default 3D objects. So now that I have those on there, the only other thing I'm really going to need is to add rigid bodies. If you don't know what rigid bodies are, they basically make it so that they basically enable physics, Unity's default physics engine. For the player, I'm going to mark it as dynamic because dynamic rigid bodies make it so they're affected by gravity, and that's basically the only difference to my understanding. Like I said, I'm not a super technically savvy person. And then I'm going to set this one as static, which basically means that it can be interacted with and it can be fallen on and it will stop something, but it can't move regardless of how much force is applied to it. So now if I click play, my player will fall onto the ground, which is a good start. Now basically the problem is if I click play, no matter what buttons I press, I cannot move my player. So that's step one. I'm going to create a folder for scripts, and in general I think it's the best idea to start with player movement. I've seen other people say this as well. This is not a new idea, but I think it's the best idea to start with player movement for prototyping, because if you can't even move the player, then that's pretty useless, and you're not really going to be able to do anything with them. So basically all I'm going to do is get rid of this, because I already know what start does. And then again, this is not really a programming tutorial. This is really for someone who understands Unity at least a little bit, or who hasn't learned to program yet but is curious about prototypes. So I'm just going to have I'm going to access a public rigid body for this, and I'm going to call it player RB. And then in start here, I'm going to access it. Rigid body 2D. So now I can access the rigid body of my player, which is basically what I'm going to need to move him. So basically all I have to do is define my speed. So I'm going to define a new float, private float. Actually, we'll make this public. It's good to make it's good to make variables that you think you might be messing with a lot public. That way you can mess with them in the Unity editor, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So it's going to be, our speed is going to be equal to input.getAxis raw, and it's going to be horizontal. Basically, this is going to make it so that our speed is equal to, if we're holding down left, it'll be equal to -1. If we're holding down right, it'll be equal to +1. I'm going to create another public float with a similar name called move speed. This is going to be the actual move speed of our player. So we're going to make it just like 5, just to start off with. Then all we're going to do is access this character's transform, use translate, which is just going to move him, and then we're going to create a new vector 2. Since we're moving in 2D, we don't need a vector 3. And then it's just going to be speed times move speed times time dot delta time. And that should be it. Since we're only moving in one direction, the y can be 0. I just put my parenthesis in the wrong place. Okay, so that should work. And that's going to be basically it. And then we should be able to move left and right. So that's kind of like the beginning of the start of your prototype. The only thing else I would do to this prototype is I would add the ability to jump, which I can do real quick by just creating a quick if statement that accesses the input, get key down, key code. And again, if you guys don't know what this is, that's completely fine. I would highly recommend, though, going to learn.unity.com, and this will show you, this will give you like a pretty in-depth tutorial about how to do some of this basic stuff in C# and Unity. Especially if you don't have any previous coding knowledge, it moves pretty slow, and it allows you to get a lot of information. Actually, it's not a transform, it's a rigid body. Okay. Oh. Basically all I'm doing is adding well, and I'll have to define a variable called jump that shows how high they can jump. We'll make that, I'm going to start pretty high because I'm notoriously bad at estimating jump. So now if we save that, if we finish it and save that, I'm going to click play. We have the ability to jump. Did I do it wrong? Or are we just not jumping very high? We're going to find out. I just set his jump to like 125. Add the force mode. This is basically just making it so it's basically just making it so that it only acts once instead of, so it can only it only puts it once instead of continuously. See, now I can jump. So that's kind of how you would make a quick prototype. It's not perfect, and as you can see, I ran into a couple of snafus just along the way. which is fairly common. Even when you watch really, really good developers write code, they often have to stop and think about really simple stuff and Google things and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, and that's how you make a quick prototype. And again, this is really simple prototype. Another prototype that I can show you is my prototype for my new game, which is kind of a top-down 2D survival turn-based game, and it's not even close to, the prototype isn't even done yet because I don't even know how to do some of it. So I'm kind of learning as I go, but I'll show you that too just as an example. Okay, so this is the prototype for my new game. So basically, the blue is the player. You click on him, it shows you how much health he has. You can move to food and water, and it'll tick up one. And then if you fight him, this enemy, your health goes down, and so does his. His health starts at 50, and you do 20 damage. And it's taking me like a week to do because I don't know how to do any of it. So prototypes can be frustrating, but they're also a great way to learn and a great way to see if you like a kind of game enough to invest the time that's going to take to learn how to make that game and to learn how to and to make all the art assets and learn how to program it. And you also get a lot of stuff out of the way. Like, I thought this game might be 3D at first, and then once I got started programming it, I realized that was going to be a huge pain. So I just decided that I would rather make it 2D and compromise a little bit on what I had started with. And these are the kind of decisions that you end up making when you prototype, which is why, again, prototyping is so important. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys enjoyed the video, didn't enjoy the video, whatever, I would love to read your comments. And if you did like the video and you want to see more of what I'm doing, feel free to subscribe. I'm posting videos once a week right now. Stuff like this, me talking about different topics. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.